Now we have in the program Dr. Brent Sellers. Dr. Sellers is a professor at the Research Center at ONA in weed management, and he'll talk for us today about weed management in rhizoma peanut.
Thank you, Joe. I'd also like to thank Glenn because he tells me, he goes, come out and spray this, and if you kill it, I don't care. So he's been a great cooperator because I can try all kinds of stuff, and if it does actually die, he doesn't care. Really doesn't, which is very good. Trisha does, but I think he gets whipped at home later. But anyway, so Dr. Sollenberger talked about how slow perennial peanut is to establish, and that's one of the downfalls when it comes to weed management, because you know whenever we have bare ground, what comes in first? Weeds. So that's something that we've always struggled with. So it's very important that you start out in a weed-free seed bed as much as you can. Even though we do that, we always end up with weeds anyway, but that's just the Lord's good way of keeping us in employment. So starting out with the weed-free seed bed is very good. During establishment, there's one herbicide that we can apply as a pre-emergence, which we also apply as a post-emergence as well. It's Impose or Panoramic, and 4 ounces per acre. You don't get very much injury, and it allows the peanut to continue to establish as much weed-free as possible. Still get some weeds coming in through that system as well. And then I'm getting a dirty look for some reason.
Different weed pressure, North Florida.
Yes, you have different weed pressure. So I'm talking primarily in South Florida. Okay, so once we get past that 1.5 to 2 years and get this peanut fully established, and we can switch into some different herbicide programs. So there's 2 broadleaf herbicides, one being Impose or Panoramic, the other one being 2,4-D. The rate of 2,4-D, we can only go up to a pint per acre. So you get dog fennel that's 3 feet tall in your perennial peanut, probably not going to kill it. So we got to make sure we hit these weeds when they're fairly small. You can combine Impose and 2,4-D as well for broadcast post-emergent control, and it's a little bit more broad spectrum, but still you don't pick up big dog fennel. So again, we got to make sure we're picking up the weeds that are fairly small. The problem we get into is with these herbicides, we're using lower rates than what we can in some situations, so we end up shifting our weed populations to ones that are a little bit more difficult to control. So we got to do some different things when we get in that situation. You can mow, that does help, and then come back over the top with 2,4-D and Impose. Get those weeds smaller. That does help. And then you can actually apply these a couple times during the growing season as well. Grass weed control, we have one herbicide called Select. There's generics of that as well. Just make sure that there is a supplemental for that on that label that says that you can be applying it to perennial peanut, because some generics do not have that listed. So I think there's Select Max, Arrow, and Top Hat or something like that. There's some other weird generic, I don't remember the exact names. But that's a way to help control common Bermuda grass and other grass weeds in the perennial peanut. Unless you're planting into Bahia grass like it's been done here, then we're in a totally different ballgame. Okay, is this better? All right. Newest thing that's just recently happened is we've been able to get a supplemental label for Glystar Plus. This is a glyphosate herbicide, and it's the only glyphosate that you can use for weed control in perennial peanut. So there's 3 options for this. One is a dormant season application, North Florida. I mean, this would be something that you could use in that situation. You can also use it as a wiper treatment, 50% concentration, and wipe it on the weeds. Just make sure you have the height differential between the weeds and the perennial peanut. And then actually we can do in season, over the top broadcast applications. So there's a handout on the table if you don't have it already, but there is some data that we've collected over the past several years using Glystar Plus, and you're going to see a couple different charts in that data, but the first one that came from Zolfo Springs, that root system had been disturbed because they harvested the roots, the rhizomes, for planting somewhere else. So it had regrown about a year before we started our treatment, so we saw a little bit more injury in that situation. But at 60 days after treatment, we saw only about 20-25% yield loss at a pint per acre. Okay? We go up to a quart per acre, about 30%, and you go up to 2 quarts per acre, you lose about 40 to 50% yield 60 days after treatment. Okay. Go into a different situation. We also did this at ONA. We looked at this on Tito, Flora Graze, EcoTurf, and then another variety that we did not release, that's not been released yet. And Flora Graze was actually the most susceptible of the 4 varieties. Especially at the higher rate at 30 days. Once you get out to 60 days, there's really no difference between the varieties. So the varieties do recover fairly well. And yield reduction on these stands really was fairly even across the varieties. We didn't see any varietal differences with regards to the herbicide treatment itself. We did see variety differences in yield, but not to the herbicide treatment. So they all responded the same, but a little bit more tolerant because these plots had been established back in 2005 when I first arrived at the center. So a lot more tolerant to glyphosate when they've been established and those root systems are undisturbed. And so how do we use this glyphosate product? Well, we've looked at it a couple different ways. We've used it by itself, and we've also used it with Impose and with 2,4-D at a pint of glyphosate, a pint of 2,4-D, and then 4 ounces of Impose. And that's one of those times you want to spray it and go on vacation for about 2 weeks and don't look at your field for a while. Okay, because it does look pretty ugly, but when you get into a situation where you have goatweed, spiderling, you have hairy indigo, you have all kinds of stuff that you can't control with the opposing 2,4-D anymore. This is a situation you have to work yourself into. So it does work, it does look ugly, but 60 days later, it responds fairly well. And you lose that much yield at the end of the day, but it does look ugly for a while. Okay, so what do we do in situations like this? So you see the yellow flowers sticking up, right? And if you end up with tropical soda apple out here, what do? You spot treat it. There's nothing we can broadcast that's going to completely control the tropical soda apple. What about small dog fennel, other broadleaf weeds? In this situation, even though my Dow rep over here won't like it too much, we can go up to a pint of a remedy, and you'll see some injury on the peanut, but it does come out of it fairly well. I think Dr. Sallenberger has some data on that as well. We collected some with the trichophyr, and it does tolerate a pint per acre fairly well. So I don't know if we have time for questions, but that's about all I can really say. There's not a lot of options on herbicides. Ms. Ann.
So is there a chance that we'll get remedy labeled for perennial peanuts? I mean,
Okay.
without reps here.
Yeah, so Ann's question is there a chance we'll get remedy labeled for perennial peanut? We're trying. So it's going to be another situation where we're going to go after a supplemental label, I believe. We're working with Dow on that, but they really don't like the injury part of it. So we're seeing. I still got to work on them.
Is Gramoxone, Basagran, Blazer, are they totally off limits? That's the old witch's brew for those old timers.
Gramoxone, Basagran, and Blazer. Okay, so those are not labeled for perennial peanut, but some of them are for regular peanut, correct? So I don't know if we can ever swing that. They're working on moving perennial peanut into the alfalfa subgroup, and if they ever do that, it's going to help get us some additional herbicides, but not great.
Were you putting any surfactants with your glyphosate application?
Okay, so question about surfactants with glyphosate. So with glyphosate, if you're at a pint or greater, you don't need a surfactant. Once you go below a pint, you do need to add a surfactant if the label tells you. Some glyphosates are different. So you just got to pay attention to that. And I believe the GlyStar Plus is once you're below a pint, you do add surfactant.
Did you try any, if this was done in the summer, did you try any, different times of the year?
Okay, so
Over the top is every
yeah,
time.
we did do this during the summer, and he's asking if we tried this any other times during the year. I've tried it early spring. I have not tried it late fall. So when you're going into dormancy, we could see a little bit increased injury and maybe reduced early season growth. But we haven't looked at that. It's something we need to do. Need more time, more hair. Larry.
Was the, I know Select is labeled for perennial peanut. Is it a better product than Fusilate? Fusilate been able to be used on row crop? Or have you ever done any studies of that?
Okay, the question on comparing Select versus Fusilade. That's a tough one. There are some species that Select's better than Fusilade, but a lot of times Fusilade's better than Select Max. So if you're dealing with common Bermuda grass, I think they're about the same. You get into some other species, Fusilade's a little bit better. So if you end up having a lot of guinea grass, Fusilade's better than Select Max.
So then the follow-up to that is, can we get a label for Fusilade?
One day, maybe. Yes, sir.
In growing season, red spiderling, over the top spraying, so you're going up to 64 ounces an acre. What's the minimum that would pick out red spiderling over the top?
I had a good witch's brew a couple years ago. I just wasn't happy with it. But so 16 ounces does okay. You go up to 24, it does a really good job.
I did 16 ounces back in March. They did not the peanut, they came back good, but there's still some spiderling left in there.
Yeah.
So I crawl around my hands and knees and I squirt bottle.
That's dedication.
You got to.
GlyStar Plus. Yeah, so my biggest thing is we can kill the existing plant. And we go back out, 7 days later, you see tiny little seedlings of spiderling. So, I think Glenn's planting it, so I keep spraying it. No? Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, and Dr. Sellers will not be with us to the tour because he will have another meeting. So if you have questions, probably now would be a good time to ask him.
Stay till 11.
Okay.
All right, thank you.